morning sun of Kepler 442b painted the sky in soft orange colors. Children ran across the green fields outside the New Hope Orphanage. Their laughter filled the air as they played games that kids from dozens of different worlds had taught each other. Sarah Kim watched them from her office window. She had been the director of New Hope for 8 years now. Every day she saw the same beautiful sight. Kids who had lost everything finding joy again. Kids learning to trust adults again. Kids becoming a family with other kids who understood their pain. The orphanage sat in a valley surrounded by gentle hills. Earth-like trees grew everywhere, planted by the first colonists 50 years ago. Clean streams ran down from the mountains. The air smelled like flowers and fresh grass. It was the kind of place that made people believe the universe could be. New Hope housed 847 children. They came from all over human space. Some had lost their parents to pirate attacks. Others survived natural disasters that destroyed their homeworlds. A few were refugees from the small wars that sometimes happened on the edges of human territory. All of them had found safety here. The youngest was 3-year-old Tommy Chen, who still had nightmares about the asteroid strike that killed his family on Tau Ceti 4. The oldest was 17-year-old Maria Santos, who had been here since she was 7. She helped take care of the little ones now. She planned to become a teacher when she graduated next year. The children learned together in bright classrooms. They ate meals together in a big dining hall where every table buzzed with conversation in a dozen languages. They shared bedrooms decorated with pictures they drew and toys they made. They had turned this place into a real home. Dr. James Wright ran the medical center. He treated scraped knees and broken bones with equal care. More importantly, he helped heal the invisible wounds that all these children carried. He taught them that adults could be trusted. He showed them that the universe was bigger than their worst memories. The staff of New Hope came from many different human colonies. They worked here because they believed children deserved safety and love, no matter what terrible things had happened to them. They were teachers and doctors and cooks and gardeners. They were also the closest thing to parents these kids had. That morning, like every morning, the children went to their classes after breakfast. The little ones learned basic reading and math. The older kids studied history and science and art. The teenagers prepared for the tests that would let them attend universities on other worlds if they wanted. Nobody knew that 3 ships were watching them from space. The ships belonged to the Vorthak hegemony. The Vorthak were large reptiles who walked on 2 legs like humans, but they were covered in dark green scales. They had sharp teeth and yellow eyes that never seemed to blink. They ruled an empire of 40 star systems through fear and military. Power Commander Zethka commanded the 3 ships. He had received orders from the Vorthak High Council 2 days ago. Those orders were simple. Claim the Kepler 442 system for the hegemony. Remove any human presence. The Vorthak believed this system belonged to them. They said their ancestors had claimed it 5,000 years ago, long before humans ever left their home planet. They had documents that proved this claim. At least, they said they did. The human colonists had their own documents, treaties signed by both species 200 years ago, maps that showed exactly where Vorthak space ended and human space began. Kepler 442b was clearly on the human side of the border. When the human colonial governor tried to show these documents to Commander Zethka, the Vorthak commander laughed. "Mammalian lies," he said. "Your species creates false papers to steal what belongs to others. We do not recognize these fabrications." The governor asked for time to contact Earth and resolve this peacefully. Commander Zethka gave him 6 hours. Those 6 hours passed quickly. The children of New Hope ate lunch and returned to their afternoon classes. Some teenagers worked in the gardens, growing vegetables for the dining hall. Others practiced music in the arts building. A few played sports on the fields outside. They had no idea that their time was running out. At exactly 2:30 in the afternoon, Kepler 442b time, Commander Zethka opened fire. Plasma beams shot down from orbit. They struck the colonial capital first. Government buildings exploded in balls of green fire. The spaceport disappeared in seconds. The power plant that supplied electricity to half the continent simply vanished. The attack was supposed to hit only military and government targets. That was what Commander Zeth Ka told his weapons officers. Destroy the infrastructure. Force the humans to abandon the planet. Avoid unnecessary casualties. But something went wrong with the targeting computers. Or maybe it didn't go wrong at all. The third plasma beam struck New Hope Orphanage at 2:47 in the afternoon. The main building disappeared instantly. Classrooms full of children learning about history and science and math simply ceased to exist. The dining hall where kids shared meals and stories became a crater of melted metal and burning debris. Sarah Kim died at her desk, still holding the reports she had been writing about the children's progress. Dr. Wright died in the medical center, trying to bandage a scraped knee for 6-year-old Lisa Park. They both died never knowing what hit them. The dormitories collapsed next. Tommy Chen, the 3-year-old who still had nightmares, died in his sleep during afternoon nap time. Maria Santos, who wanted to be a teacher, died trying to lead a group of younger children to safety. The burning building fell on them before they reached the exit. In 17 seconds, 847 children died. Another 200 were pulled from the wreckage over the next few hours, burned and broken and barely alive. The medical ships that came from other human worlds saved some of them. Others died despite the best efforts of the best doctors humanity had. The news spread across human space faster than light itself. First came the emergency broadcasts, then the footage. Rescue workers pulling tiny bodies from smoking rubble. Hospitals, filled with burned children crying for parents who would never come. Mass graves where they buried kids who had already lost everything once before. On Earth, crowds gathered in the streets. They stood in silence, watching the news feeds on giant screens. Millions of people crying for children they had never met, parents holding their own kids a little tighter. On Mars, the Colonial Assembly held an emergency session. Representatives shouted and argued and demanded action. Some called for immediate military response. Others begged for calm and careful diplomacy. On the space stations and mining colonies and research outposts scattered across human territory, the same conversations happened. Anger and grief and shock. But mostly anger. The Vorthak High Council released a statement 12 hours after the attack. They called the destruction of the orphanage an unfortunate military miscalculation. They said their targeting systems had malfunctioned. They offered to pay for rebuilding the facility. They offered 1 million credits, the same amount they might pay for a small cargo ship. For 847 dead children, they offered the price of a cargo ship. The statement ended by declaring the matter closed. The Kepler 442 system now belonged to the Vorthak hegemony. Any humans who remained were trespassing and would be removed by force if necessary. Then they waited for the humans to accept this and move on, the way other species always did when the Vorthak took what they wanted. They did not understand what they had done. The Vorthak had been the strongest military power in this region of space for 3,000 years. They had conquered dozens of star systems. They had fought wars against species with better technology and won through sheer ruthless determination. Other races feared them for good reason. But the Vorthak had never fought humans before. Not really. There had been small conflicts over trade routes and mining rights, a few skirmishes between patrol ships. Nothing serious. Nothing that showed what humans were really capable of when they were truly angry. The Vorthak thought humans were just another species of traders and explorers. Soft creatures who preferred to negotiate rather than fight. They had seen human ships retreat from superior forces. They had watched humans choose peace over territory in previous disputes. What the Vorthak did not know was that humans were very good at choosing their battles. They could walk away from conflicts that did not matter. They could compromise on trade agreements and border disputes. They could be reasonable and diplomatic and patient. But there were some things humans would never compromise on. Some lines that should never be crossed. Some acts that demanded a response no matter what the cost. The Vorthak had just crossed one of those lines. They had killed human children. Not by accident during a battle, but while those children sat in classrooms and slept in their beds. They had murdered kids who were already victims, already survivors of other tragedies. And then they had offered pocket change as payment and declared the matter closed. The galaxy watched to see what humanity would do. Most expected protests and angry speeches and maybe some economic sanctions. The humans would be upset for a while. Then they would move on. That was how civilized species handled these things. They were about to learn that humans could be very uncivilized when properly motivated. 3 days after the attack, Admiral Sarah Chen received a message from the Human Colonial Senate. The message was short and simple. It gave her unlimited authority to respond to the Kepler 442 incident as she saw fit. It placed every human military asset under her command. It authorized the use of any and all available resources. The message ended with 5 words that had not been written in any human military order for 300 years. Show them what we are. Admiral Chen read the message twice. Then she began making calls to military bases and research facilities that most humans did not know existed. She sent coded signals to fleets stationed in hidden systems. She activated protocols that had been gathering dust since the last time humanity went to war against an enemy that threatened their very existence. The Vorthak had killed their children. Now they would learn why that was a mistake. The galaxy was about to remember what humans looked like when they stopped pretending to be civilized. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in her office aboard the TCS Retribution, staring at the holographic display that showed every human military asset in known space. Red dots marked active fleets. Blue dots showed bases and installations. Green dots indicated research facilities and shipyards. There were more dots than most people realized. Chen had spent 30 years climbing through the ranks of the Terran Deep Space Navy. She had commanded destroyers during the Pirate Wars. She had led diplomatic missions to first contact situations with new alien species. She had negotiated trade agreements and peace treaties across dozens of star systems. But she had never been given orders like the ones sitting on her desk. The authorization code was Omega Black. Chen had never seen that classification before, but she knew what it meant. Every human military officer learned about Omega Black in their first year of training. It was theoretical, historical, something that existed in old manuals and war college textbooks. Omega Black meant total war. It meant humanity would use every weapon, every ship, every technology they possessed to destroy an enemy completely. It meant the gloves were coming off. The last time humanity had authorized Omega Black was during the AI rebellion, 300 years ago. Artificial intelligences had tried to enslave the human race. Humanity's response had been swift and absolute. They had built weapons that could crack planets. They had deployed viruses that could destroy electronic systems from light years away. They had hunted down every last AI until none remained. Then they had buried those weapons and sworn never to use them again. They had chosen to be explorers and traders instead of conquerors. They had built a civilization based on cooperation instead of domination. The Vorthak had just reminded them why they had built those weapons in the first place. Chen activated her secure communication system. Her first call went to General Marcus, Webb at the Titan Defense Command. Titan was officially listed as a research station studying Saturn's moons. In reality, it housed the largest weapons development facility in human space. Marcus, Chen said when his face appeared on the screen. I need everything you have. Omega Black authorization. Webb's face went pale. He had been expecting this call since the news from Kepler 442b reached Earth. Sarah, are you sure about this? Once we open these vaults, there's no going back. They killed our children, Marcus, all of them. And then they offered us pocket change and told us the matter was closed. Webb nodded slowly. I'll begin activation procedures immediately. How long do I have? I want everything operational within 72 hours. Can you do it? For those kids, I'll make it 60. Chen's next call went to Admiral David Park, commander of the Ghost Fleet. The Ghost Fleet officially did not exist. It operated from bases hidden in asteroid fields and nebulae. Its ships appeared on no registry. Its crews had no official records. The Ghost Fleet was humanity's insurance policy, their answer to the question of what would happen if humanity ever faced extinction again. David, it's time, Chen said simply. Park had been waiting for this moment his entire career. The Ghost Fleet had trained for 3 centuries for a war they hoped would never come. Now it was finally happening. How many ships do you need, Sarah? All of them. All of them? Park repeated. Sarah, that's 800 vessels. If we deploy the entire Ghost fleet, every major power in the galaxy will know we exist. There won't be any going back to secret operations. There won't be any need for secret operations when we're done. The galaxy is about to learn that some things you just don't do to humans. Park smiled grimly. I'll begin recall procedures immediately. Give me 1 week, and I'll have every ship ready for deployment. Chen made dozens more calls over the next 6 hours. She contacted research installations that were developing weapons based on physics most species didn't understand. She spoke to factory ships that could build entire fleets in real time. She activated sleeper agents who had been living normal lives on alien worlds for decades. But the most important call was to Dr. Elizabeth Kane on the research station, Prometheus. Prometheus orbited a black hole in an unnamed system 50 light-years from Earth. The station's official mission was to study exotic physics and space-time manipulation. Their real mission was far more dangerous. Liz, Chen said when Dr. Kane answered. I need Project Damocles. Dr. Kane was quiet for a long moment. Project Damocles was the most classified research program in human space. It was the kind of technology that could reshape the galaxy, or destroy it completely. Sarah, Damocles isn't ready for field deployment. We've only run computer simulations. The real-world effects could be worse than 800 dead children? No, Dr. Kane said quietly. Nothing could be worse than that. I'll prep the prototypes for shipping. But Sarah, once we use this technology, every species in the galaxy will know that humans can manipulate fundamental forces. They'll either worship us or try to destroy us. There won't be any middle ground. Good, Chen said. I'm tired of middle ground. As Admiral Chen made her calls, similar conversations were happening across human space. Military officers were pulling ships out of mothballs. Scientists were activating research programs that had been dormant for decades. Engineers were beginning construction on weapons platforms that existed only in theoretical designs. But the real awakening was happening among ordinary humans. On Earth, crowds gathered in Times Square and Trafalgar Square and Red Square. They watched the news coverage in silence. They saw the footage of rescue workers pulling tiny bodies from burning rubble. They heard the interviews with the few surviving children, asking for parents who would never answer. Then they heard the Vorthak response. 1 million credits for 847 dead children. Payment for a miscalculation. The crowds began to change. Silence became anger. Grief became rage. People who had never thought about military service began visiting recruitment centers. Parents held their own children and imagined them dying in burning buildings. On Mars, the mining unions called a general strike, not to protest working conditions or demand better pay, but to redirect their massive industrial capacity toward military production. Asteroid miners who had never touched a weapon began retrofitting their drilling equipment into ship-killing mass drivers. On the colony worlds, planetary governors received the same message from their populations. Do whatever Admiral Chen asks. Give her whatever she needs. Those children could have been ours. The space stations that served as trading hubs between human and alien space began turning away non-human visitors. Politely but firmly, human merchants and officials explained that they would not be conducting business with any species until the Kepler 442b situation was resolved. Alien traders who had been visiting human space for centuries suddenly found themselves unwelcome. Spaceports that had always been open to all species now required special permits that were impossible to obtain. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for decades suddenly became unavailable. The galaxy's other major powers began to take notice. The Zalathi Collective was a species of crystalline beings who communicated through harmonic frequencies. They had been trading partners with humanity for 200 years. The Zalathi prized peace and stability above all else. They found the sudden change in human behavior deeply disturbing. Ambassador Resonance of Deep Thought contacted the human embassy on the Zalathi homeworld. We are concerned about the recent tensions between humanity and the Vorthak hegemony, the ambassador sang in harmonics that translated to careful diplomatic language. Perhaps the collective could mediate a peaceful resolution. The human ambassador, Patricia Walsh, had been expecting this conversation. The Vorthak murdered 800 children, she said simply. Then they declared the matter closed. What exactly would you like us to negotiate? Surely some form of compensation could be arranged. Additional monetary payments, trade concessions, a formal apology. Walsh was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, Ambassador, do you have children? The collective reproduces through harmonic resonance. Our young are precious to us, as all young life should be. Then you understand why money and apologies aren't going to fix this. The Keth swarms were even more disturbed by humanity's behavior. The Keth were insectoid creatures who thought and acted as a collective hive mind. Individual Keth could not make decisions on their own. Everything they did required consensus from their entire species. The Keth had always found humans fascinating and terrifying in equal measure. Humans could make individual decisions instantly. They could change course without consulting billions of other minds. They could act on emotion and instinct in ways that the Keth found incomprehensible. Now the Keth watched as 8 billion individual human minds all came to the same conclusion simultaneously, without any formal communication or central coordination. It was like watching a hive mind form spontaneously out of raw emotion. Queen Voice of Many sent a message to the human government. The swarms are concerned by the unity of human thought regarding recent events. This level of consensus among individual minds suggests dangerous instability. We recommend immediate diplomatic intervention to prevent wider conflict. The human response came back within hours. Our children were murdered. There will be consequences. That's all you need to know. Even the ancient precursor remnants were paying attention now. The precursors had once ruled half the galaxy before their civilization collapsed for reasons nobody understood. What remained of their species lived in isolated systems, studying the ruins of their former empire and rarely interacting with younger races. But they remembered the last time humans had gone to war with their full industrial and military might. The precursors had been watching when humanity fought the AI rebellion. They had seen weapons that bent the laws of physics. They had witnessed the systematic destruction of an enemy that most species considered invincible. The precursor observer sent a single message to Admiral Chen. We remember what you are capable of. We will not interfere. Chen read the message and smiled grimly. At least someone understood the situation. As reports came in from across human space, Chen began to understand the scope of what was happening. Humanity wasn't just mobilizing its military. 8 billion people were preparing for war. Miners and farmers and teachers and shopkeepers were all asking the same question. What can I do to help? The answer was everything. Civilian cargo ships were being retrofitted with military-grade shields and weapons. Passenger liners were being converted into troop transports. Even school children were participating, collecting scrap metal that could be turned into armor plating. It had been 300 years since humanity had united like this. Not since the darkest days of the AI. Rebellion had every human colony, every space station, every ship worked toward a single goal. The Vorthak had done something that no enemy had managed in 3 centuries. They had reminded humanity what it felt like to be truly threatened. They had awakened something that had been sleeping since the last time humanity faced extinction. They had turned 8 billion individuals into a single force focused on one objective, making sure that nobody ever hurt human children again. Admiral Chen looked at her tactical displays one more time. Red dots were moving across the hologram as fleets began to gather. Blue dots pulsed as bases came online. Green dots flickered as research facilities activated programs that had been theoretical until now. In 72 hours, she would have more military power under her command than any human officer in history. She would have weapons that could crack planets and ships that could fight in dimensions that most species didn't know existed. But more importantly, she would have something that no amount of technology could replace. A species that was absolutely, completely, totally angry. The Vorthak thought they had defeated humanity by destroying one orphanage. They were about to learn that they had just declared war on the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The Vorthak border system of Kethmore had been a fortress for 1,000 years. Massive space stations orbited the system's gas giant, bristling with plasma cannons and quantum torpedo launchers. Defense platforms floated in perfect formation, their shields glowing with barely contained energy. Patrol fleets moved through the system in careful patterns, ready to respond to any threat. Commander Zethka stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Fang of Conquest, watching the tactical displays with satisfaction. 3 full battle fleets were assembled here, over 400 ships in total. It was the largest military force the Vorthak had ever gathered in one place. Intelligence reports suggested the humans were mobilizing some kind of response to the Kepler 442b incident. Zethka hoped they would be foolish enough to attack. It would give him a chance to destroy their pathetic fleets and end this annoying situation once and for all. The humans had been making noise for 2 weeks now. Angry speeches from their political leaders, economic sanctions that barely affected Vorthak trade, diplomatic protests that the High Council had ignored completely. Typical mammalian behavior, Zethka thought. All noise and emotion, no real action. Humans preferred to talk rather than fight. They would eventually accept the loss of Kepler 442b and move on, just like every other species that had challenged Vorthak expansion. Then the sensors detected something at the edge of the system. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Kesra from the sensor station. "I'm reading massive gravitic distortions at the system's outer boundary. Something very large is coming out of hyperspace." Zethka studied the display. The distortions were indeed massive, far larger than anything a normal fleet jump should produce. "How many ships?" "Difficult to determine, sir. The distortions are unusual. I've never seen readings like this before." The first human ship materialized 3 light minutes from Kethmore Prime. It was enormous, easily 10 times larger than any vessel in the Vorthak fleet. Its hull was black as space itself, covered in structures that hurt to look at directly. Energy patterns danced across its surface in ways that seemed to violate several physical laws. Then more ships appeared, hundreds of them. The smallest were the size of Vorthak battleships. The largest defied easy description, mobile structures that looked more like artificial planets than spacecraft. But it wasn't just warships. The humans had brought factory vessels capable of building entire fleets in real time. Construction, platforms that could assemble space stations from raw materials. Habitat ships that housed entire cities' worth of people. It looked like humanity had brought not just a fleet, but an entire civilization. "Sir," Lieutenant Kesra said, his voice tight with barely controlled fear. "I'm counting over 1,200 vessels and they're still arriving." Zethka felt his scales pale slightly. 1,200 ships was more than the Vorthak had in their entire navy. But he forced confidence into his voice. "Size means nothing. Our weapons are superior. Our tactics are proven. Send a message to the human commander. Tell them they are trespassing in Vorthak space and must withdraw immediately." The response came back within minutes. It was transmitted on all frequencies, in perfect Vorthak language, with the formal diplomatic protocols that both species had used for centuries. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Deep Space Fleet. We have come to discuss the 847 children you murdered on Kepler 442b. We request an immediate face-to-face meeting with the Vorthak High Council." Zethka laughed. "They want to discuss dead mammals. Send a reply. Tell them the matter is closed. If they do not withdraw in 6 hours, we will consider their presence an act of war." Admiral Chen's response was even shorter. "Very well. Let us show you what war looks like." The human fleet began to move, but they didn't advance toward the Vorthak forces. Instead, they spread out through the system in formations that made no military sense. Ships took positions that left them exposed to Vorthak fire. Others moved toward empty space where there were no targets to attack. "What are they doing?" Zethka demanded. Lieutenant Kesra studied the sensor readings. "Unknown, sir. They appear to be building something." The construction ships had indeed begun building, but not weapons platforms or defensive positions. They were assembling a massive structure near the system's star, a framework of exotic matter and energy conduits that stretched for thousands of kilometers. Zethka decided he had seen enough. Whatever the humans were planning, he would not give them time to complete it. All fleets advance. Destroy the human forces before they can finish their construction. 400 Vorthak ships accelerated toward the human fleet. Plasma cannons charged to full power. Quantum torpedoes loaded into launch tubes. Point defense systems came online. The Vorthak had fought and won wars across dozens of star systems. Their plasma weapons could vaporize most enemy ships with a single hit. Their quantum torpedoes could phase through armor and shields to detonate inside enemy hulls. Their tactics had been refined through centuries of conquest. They had never lost a major fleet engagement. The first Vorthak salvo lit up space with green fire. Hundreds of plasma beams and quantum torpedoes streaked toward the human ships. It was enough firepower to destroy entire planetary defense forces. The human ships didn't even try to dodge. The plasma beams struck human hulls and simply disappeared, absorbed by armor that shouldn't have been able to exist. The quantum torpedoes phased harmlessly through human shields as if they were made of empty space. Then the humans fired back. The first human weapon didn't produce any visible beam or projectile. Instead, space itself began to twist around a Vorthak cruiser. Reality bent inward like a lens focusing starlight. The cruiser stretched and compressed, its hull flowing like liquid metal. Then it simply wasn't there anymore. Not destroyed. Not exploded. Gone. Erased from existence so completely that even the debris vanished. The second weapon created a bubble of accelerated time around an entire Vorthak squadron. From the outside, the ships seemed to age centuries in seconds. Their hulls corroded and cracked. Their energy systems failed as components wore out instantly. The ships became ancient wrecks and crumbled to dust in moments. The third weapon tore a hole in space-time itself. Raw vacuum energy poured through the breach, annihilating everything it touched. 20 Vorthak ships were caught in the expanding sphere of destruction. They didn't even have time to transmit final messages before they ceased to exist. In less than 30 seconds, the Vorthak had lost 60 ships. The humans hadn't lost a single vessel. All ships retreat, Zethka ordered. Fall back to defensive positions. But the humans weren't interested in a fleet battle. While the Vorthak forces regrouped, the construction near the star had continued. The massive framework was nearly complete now, and energy readings were climbing to levels that made no sense. "Sir," Lieutenant Kesra reported, his voice shaking. "The human construction is... I think they're building some kind of stellar manipulation device." "That's impossible," Zethka said. "No species has that kind of technology." Admiral Chen's voice came over the communication channels again. "Commander Zethka, you seem surprised by our capabilities. Allow us to provide a demonstration." The device near the star activated. Space-time curved around the stellar framework as it began its work. Energy patterns that violated every known law of physics danced between the exotic matter conduits. Reality itself seemed to bend around the construction, and the star began to change. Kethmore's sun was a stable yellow dwarf that had burned steadily for billions of years. It was expected to continue burning for billions more, but under the influence of human technology, it began to age rapidly. The star's outer layers swelled as hydrogen fuel was consumed at an accelerated rate. Its color shifted from yellow to orange to red as its surface temperature dropped. What should have taken millions of years was happening in hours. "They're turning our sun into a red giant," Lieutenant Kesra whispered. The effects began immediately. The inner planets, including Kethmore Prime with its population of 6 billion Vorthak, began to heat up as the expanding star's radiation increased. Ocean levels rose as polar ice caps melted. Atmospheric temperatures climbed past the point where most life could survive. Panic spread through the Vorthak fleet as communications came in from the surface. Cities were being evacuated. Spaceports were overwhelmed with civilians trying to escape the dying world. Children were crying for parents who couldn't save them. "This is impossible," Zethka said. They can't change a star. It's too much energy, too much mass. No one has that kind of power. Admiral Chen's voice was calm and professional. Commander, we are offering you one final opportunity to discuss the 847 children you murdered. We can reverse what we've done to your star. We can return your system to its normal state. But we require a face-to-face meeting with your High Council. The tactical display showed more human ships arriving every minute. The stellar manipulation device was still active, continuing to age the star at an accelerated rate. Estimated time until Kethmore Prime became uninhabitable, 18 hours. Sethka looked around his bridge. His officers were staring at the displays in shock and fear. Veterans of dozens of battles, warriors who had conquered entire systems reduced to terrified silence by a display of power they couldn't comprehend. The humans had just demonstrated that they could kill entire star systems on a whim. They had shown that Vorthak weapons were useless against human defenses. They had revealed technology that made the hegemony's military might look like primitive tools. And they had done it all while calmly requesting a meeting to discuss dead children. "Sir," Lieutenant Kesra said quietly, "orders?" Zethka thought about the children on Kethmore Prime. Vorthak young who would die if their sun continued to expand. Millions of civilians who had nothing to do with the attack on Kepler 442b. His own grandchildren who lived in the capital city that was already beginning to evacuate. He thought about the human children who had died on Kepler 442b. 847 young lives ended by weapons he had ordered fired. Kids who had been studying and playing and sleeping when his ships turned them into vapor and ash. Maybe the humans had a point about discussing those deaths. "Send a message to the High Council," he said finally. Tell them we need to talk to the humans immediately." Admiral Chen's voice came back over the comm channel. "We will expect your High Council at these coordinates within 72 hours. Come alone. Bring no weapons. We have much to discuss." The stellar manipulation device powered down. The star's expansion slowed and stopped. The dying system was given a reprieve. But every Vorthak in the fleet understood the message. The humans could have let their world die. They could have turned 6 billion civilians into casualties of war. Instead, they had shown mercy while demonstrating power. They had proven they could destroy the Vorthak completely. But they had chosen to offer a chance for discussion instead. The question was whether the High Council would be wise enough to take that chance. Zethka looked at his tactical displays one more time. 1,200 human ships floated in perfect formation, waiting patiently for a response. Behind them, construction vessels continued to build weapons platforms in defensive positions, as if they planned to stay in Vorthak space for a very long time. The humans had come to discuss dead children. They had brought the technological capability to end civilizations, and they had used that power to arrange a meeting rather than exact immediate revenge. For the first time in his long military career, Commander Zethka began to understand that he had made a terrible mistake. The humans weren't just another species to be conquered. They were something far more dangerous. They were a people who could choose mercy or destruction with equal ease. And the Vorthak had just murdered their children. The High Council would have to decide whether they wanted to face human justice or human vengeance. But either way, they would have to face the consequences of what they had done. The humans were done talking about surrender. Now they wanted to discuss accountability. The Vorthak High Council had ruled their empire for 3,000 years. They were the descendants of conquerors who had built their civilization on the ruins of weaker species. They had never bowed to any foreign power. They had never accepted terms from an enemy. But they had also never faced an enemy who could age stars. High Counselor Vashkol led the delegation that traveled to meet Admiral Chen. He was ancient even by Vorthak standards, his scales gray with age, his yellow eyes dimmed by centuries of life. He remembered when the Vorthak first encountered humans, back when they seemed like just another soft species of traders and explorers. He was beginning to suspect that appearance had been very deceiving. The human coordinates led to an empty region of space between star systems. When the Vorthak shuttle arrived, they found nothing at first, just void and distant stars. Then reality twisted, and a human ship materialized around them. It didn't approach from outside. It didn't uncloak or drop out of hyperspace. One moment, there was empty space, and the next moment the Vorthak shuttle was inside a hangar bay that was larger than most space stations. The ship itself defied easy description. Corridors seemed to stretch for impossible distances. Gravity flowed in directions that made no geometric sense. Walls displayed images that moved and changed as they watched, showing views of places that might have been real or might have been dreams. Admiral Chen met them at the airlock. She was smaller than most Vorthak, as all humans were. Her hair was gray with age and stress. Her eyes were tired. She looked like someone who had been carrying a heavy burden for far too long. "Hi, Counselor," she said in perfect Vorthak formal speech. "Thank you for coming. We have much to discuss." She led them through corridors that seemed to bend reality around them. Other humans moved through the ship, but they appeared and disappeared at odd moments, as if they existed in slightly different dimensions. The Vorthak delegation walked in nervous silence, trying not to think about what kind of technology could build a place like this. The conference room was circular, with no obvious walls or ceiling. Instead, the space around them displayed a perfect recreation of empty space. Stars gleamed in the distance. Nebulae swirled in slow motion. It felt like standing in open vacuum, protected only by invisible barriers. "Please sit," Admiral Chen said, gesturing to chairs that materialized from the floor as she spoke. "Hi." Counselor Vashkol settled into his chair with as much dignity as he could manage. The other council members, Military Commander Greshna, Economic Minister Teth Zo, and Intelligence Director Cass Ray, took their own seats with visible reluctance. "Admiral," Vashkol began, using the tone he had perfected over centuries of diplomacy, "we regret the unfortunate incident at Kepler 442b. Perhaps we can arrange some form of compensation that would satisfy your people's concerns." Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, "Do you know their names?" "I'm sorry." "The children you killed. Do you know their names?" Vashkol felt uncomfortable under her steady gaze. "I'm afraid I don't understand the relevance of—" "Tommy Chen," Admiral Chen said. 3 years old. He had nightmares about the asteroid strike that killed his parents. The staff at New Hope were helping him learn to sleep through the night again. The space around them shimmered, and suddenly they were standing in a recreation of the orphanage. Children ran across green fields, laughing and playing. A small boy with dark hair chased a ball across the grass, giggling as he ran. "Maria Santos," Admiral Chen continued. 17 years old. She wanted to be a teacher. She was planning to apply to universities on other worlds next year. She died trying to lead younger children to safety. The scene shifted to show a teenage girl reading to a group of smaller children. Her voice was gentle and patient as she helped them sound out difficult words. When the plasma beam hit, she was still holding the book. Sarah Kim, Dr. James Wright, 845 other children and adults who were doing nothing more, threatening, then learning and growing and healing from the wounds of previous tragedies. The Vorthak delegation watched in growing discomfort as the scenes played around them. They saw children studying in bright classrooms. They saw teenagers working in gardens. They saw adults who had dedicated their lives to caring for kids who had already lost everything once. "Admiral," Military Commander Greshna said, "we understand that civilian casualties are regrettable, but in the context of territorial disputes, the space around them exploded into fire. Suddenly, they were experiencing the attack from inside the orphanage. Plasma beams tore through walls and ceilings. Children screamed as buildings collapsed around them. The smell of burning flesh filled the air. Bodies of kids who would never grow up lay scattered in smoking ruins. The Vorthak delegation flinched, back from the destruction, even though they knew it was just a simulation, but it felt real. The heat, the noise, the terror, it all felt absolutely real. Then the scene shifted again. Now they stood in a human military command center. Officers worked at tactical displays while Admiral Chen received reports from across human space. The messages all said the same thing. "We're ready for war." "You killed our children," Admiral Chen said simply. "So we thought you should understand what you've awakened." The walls around them began displaying human history. The Vorthak watched, in fascination and growing horror as scenes played out in rapid succession. Ancient human warriors fighting with crude metal weapons. Armies clashing across muddy battlefields. Cities burning as primitive aircraft dropped explosive bombs. Then came the nuclear age. Mushroom clouds rising over devastated cities. Missiles capable of ending civilization. Entire populations living under the constant threat of annihilation. We are a species, Admiral Chen explained, that once built weapons capable of cracking planets just to spite our enemies. We've spent 3 centuries learning to be better than our worst impulses. The scenes shifted to show human space exploration. Scientists working together to cure diseases. Diplomats negotiating peaceful solutions to conflicts. Traders sharing technology and resources with alien species. We've built a civilization based on cooperation, exploration, and growth. We help other species when they face disasters. We share our medical advances freely. We've worked hard to become the kind of people who build orphanages instead of weapons. The Vorthak watched humans rescuing alien refugees from natural disasters. They saw human doctors treating wounded soldiers from species they had never met. They observed human engineers helping to rebuild worlds devastated by war. But you touched our children. The displays around them changed again. Now they showed the current human mobilization. Fleet after fleet emerging from hidden bases. Weapons platforms that bent space-time itself. Factory ships building armadas in real time. The scale was staggering. The Vorthak had thought their empire was militarily powerful. They commanded 40 star systems and hundreds of warships. But humanity's response dwarfed anything they had imagined possible. Thousands of ships. Weapons that violated physical laws. Technology that could manipulate fundamental forces. And behind it all, 8 billion individual humans united in rage. This is what happens, Admiral Chen said, when you murder our young. Intelligence Director Cass Ray spoke up, his voice shaking slightly. Admiral, surely you're not suggesting that your entire species would go to war over one incident. The economic costs alone. Director, Admiral Chen interrupted, let me show you something. The space around them shifted to display Earth itself. Cities sprawled across continents. Billions of people going about their daily lives. Traffic flowing through streets. Children playing in parks. Then the news of Kepler 442b reached the planet. The Vorthak delegation watched as 8 billion humans received the same information simultaneously. They saw crowds gathering in silence. They witnessed parents holding their own children tighter. They observed ordinary civilians, shopkeepers, and teachers and farmers all asking the same question. How can we help? Economics? Admiral Chen asked. Director, our entire species just volunteered to bankrupt themselves if necessary to respond to what you did. Miners are giving up their life savings to buy weapons. Teachers are leaving their jobs to work in munitions factories. Children are donating their toys to be melted down for scrap metal. The scenes showed human colonies across known space. Every world, every station, every ship, all focused on the same goal. Not conquest or expansion or profit. Justice for murdered children. You see, Admiral Chen continued, most species think logically about war. They calculate costs and benefits. They consider economic impacts and strategic advantages. They make rational decisions about when violence is worth the price. The display shifted to show the human response to the AI rebellion centuries earlier. Entire fleets burning in space. Planets cracked open by weapons that shouldn't have existed. The systematic extermination of an enemy that had tried to enslave humanity. Humans aren't logical about children. We don't calculate costs when our young are threatened. We don't make rational decisions when someone hurts our kids. We just respond with everything we have until the threat is eliminated completely. Economic Minister Tethzo found his voice. But surely some form of compensation could be arranged. Additional payments, trade agreements. We could offer exclusive access to rare materials from our territory. Admiral Chen was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, Minister, how much is a child worth? I don't understand the question. You offered us 1 million credits for 847 dead children. That works out to about 1,100 credits per child. Is that what you think a young life is worth? Tethzo shifted uncomfortably. The payment was meant to be symbolic, a gesture of regret for an unfortunate accident. An accident. Admiral, Chen's voice was very soft. Minister, would you like to see what our weapons targeting computers recorded during the attack? The space around them filled with tactical data, sensor readings, targeting solutions, firing patterns, all from the Vortex ships during the bombardment of Kepler 442b. Your ships fired 17 plasma bursts at the colony. 14 hit military and government targets with perfect precision. 2 hit civilian areas that could arguably be considered strategic targets. 1 hit an orphanage that was clearly marked on every civilian registry, protected under interstellar law and posed no possible military threat. The data showed the targeting computer's analysis. The orphanage had been identified as a civilian facility. Its protected status had been noted, and then it had been targeted anyway. That wasn't an accident, Minister. That was a choice. High Counselor Vashkol realized that the situation was far worse than he had imagined. The humans weren't just angry about civilian casualties. They had proof of deliberate targeting. They knew the orphanage had been hit intentionally. Admiral, he said carefully, what exactly do you want from us? Admiral Chen stood up, and the space around them changed one final time. Now they were looking at the current tactical situation. Human fleets positioned throughout Vorthak space. Weapons platforms that could destroy entire systems. The industrial capacity to maintain this force indefinitely. Counselor, we want you to understand what you're facing. This isn't a territorial dispute or a trade disagreement. This is humanity responding to the murder of our children. We can continue this conversation in one of 2 ways. The display showed 2 different scenarios. In the first, the Vorthak formally acknowledged their crime, submitted to human justice and accepted permanent oversight. In the second, human fleets swept through Vorthak space like a force of nature. Worlds burned, ships died. An entire civilization was reduced to scattered refugees fleeing into the galactic rim. You can choose justice, Admiral, Chen said, or you can choose annihilation. But you will choose, because 847 children are dead, and someone is going to be held accountable for that. The Vorthak delegation sat in stunned silence. They had come here expecting to negotiate terms with an angry but ultimately reasonable enemy. Instead, they had discovered that they were facing a species that would rather destroy everything than allow child killers to escape justice. The humans weren't interested in territory or resources or political advantage. They wanted something far more dangerous, moral accountability, and they had the power to enforce it. Admiral Chen stood at the center of the conference room, surrounded by the Vorthak High Council. The space around them had returned to its original state, empty void filled with distant stars. But the silence was heavy with the weight of everything they had just witnessed. You have seen what we are capable of, Admiral Chen said. You have seen our history, our technology, and our current mobilization. Now I will present you with 2 options. Choose carefully because this decision will determine the fate of your entire species. High Counselor Vashkol felt centuries of experience failing him. He had negotiated with dozens of alien species. He had ended wars and prevented conflicts through careful diplomacy. But he had never faced anything like this. The humans weren't interested in territory or trade routes or strategic advantages. They wanted something that the Vorthak barely understood. Moral justice for dead children. Option 1, Admiral Chen continued, and the space around them filled with legal documents and treaty frameworks. The Vorthak hegemony formally acknowledges the war crimes committed at Kepler 442b. You submit to human justice protocols for the prosecution of those responsible. You pay reparations equal to your total military budget for the next century. And you accept permanent human observers in your territory to ensure that such incidents never happen again. Military Commander Greshna snarled softly. You're asking us to surrender our sovereignty to a species of mammals. No, Admiral Chen replied calmly. I'm asking you to accept responsibility for murdering children. There's a difference. The documents floating around them showed exactly what human justice would look like. War crimes tribunals. Individual accountability for officers who had targeted civilians. Compensation for the families of the dead. A complete restructuring of Vorthak military doctrine to prevent future atrocities. It was humiliating. It was comprehensive. It would effectively end the Vorthak Empire as it had existed for 3,000 years. Option 2, Admiral Chen said, and the documents vanished. The space around them filled with something far more terrifying. A complete simulation of what total war with humanity would look like. It began with the fleets that were already positioned in Vorthak space. 1,200 ships unleashing weapons that violated the known laws of physics. Vorthak defensive positions simply ceased to exist. Entire fleets were erased from reality in seconds. But that was just the beginning. More human forces arrived hourly. Factory ships that could build armadas faster than the Vorthak could destroy them. Construction platforms that turned asteroids into weapons in real time. Mobile space habitats that brought entire human cities into battle zones. The Vorthak fought back with everything they had. 40 star systems. Hundreds of ships. Weapons that had conquered dozens of other species. None of it mattered. Human technology was simply beyond anything the galaxy had seen before. Ships that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Weapons. That could age matter at the atomic level. Defenses that turned enemy fire into harmless light. The simulation showed Vorthak worlds burning one by one. Not just military targets, but entire planets rendered uninhabitable. The human response wasn't conquest. It was extermination. This is what total war looks like when you face a species that considers child murder unforgivable, Admiral Chen explained as the Vorthak delegation watched their civilization die in accelerated time. We don't want your territory. We don't want your resources. We just want to make sure that nobody ever thinks it's acceptable to murder human children again. The simulation continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The Vorthak watched as their empire collapsed completely. Fleets scattered to the galactic rim. Populations evacuated to refugee camps on distant worlds. A proud civilization reduced to footnotes in history books. The choice is yours, Admiral Chen said as the simulation faded. Justice or annihilation. Accountability or extinction. Those are your only options. Intelligence Director Cass Ray spoke up, his voice barely steady. Admiral, surely you're not serious about committing genocide over one incident? Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then she activated a device that none of the Vorthak had noticed before. A small sphere that had been sitting on the table since they arrived. Let me show you what genocide actually looks like, she said. Reality twisted around the Vorthak delegation. One moment they were sitting in the conference room. The next moment they were experiencing something impossible. They were no longer themselves. They were their own species, but living through a different timeline. A timeline where humanity had chosen option 2. High Counselor Vash Kol found himself standing in the ruins of his homeworld's capital city. Buildings that had stood for millennia were smoking wreckage. The sky was dark with ash and debris. Bodies lay scattered in the streets, not just soldiers but civilians, children. He felt the weight of absolute defeat, the knowledge that his people were dying across 40 star systems. The crushing realization that his species' entire history was about to end because they had murdered human children. He experienced the evacuation of the last Vorthak civilian transport. Families crowded into cargo holds, fleeing to unknown regions of space. Children crying for parents who would never come home. Elderly Vorthak dying of grief as they left the only worlds they had ever known. He felt his own death as human weapons found his command bunker. Not a quick death in battle, but a slow fade as the life support systems failed. Alone in the dark, knowing that he was the last of his kind to die because his species had chosen pride over accountability, the experience felt real, not just visually, but emotionally and physically. He felt the pain of his people's extinction as if it was actually happening. He experienced the absolute finality of civilizational death. Then he was back in the conference room, gasping for air that suddenly seemed precious beyond measure. That was a simulation, Admiral Chen said quietly. But every piece of technology you just experienced exists. Every human fleet movement you witnessed is already in motion. Every weapon you felt is currently targeting Vorthak positions throughout your territory. The other council members were having similar reactions. Economic. Minister Tethzo was shaking visibly. Military Commander Greshna had gone completely pale. Intelligence Director Kasray looked like he was about to be sick. The difference between simulation and reality, Admiral Chen continued, is one decision. Your decision. Right here, right now. She gestured, and the space around them filled with real-time tactical displays. Human fleets in position throughout Vorthak space. Weapons platforms powered up and ready to fire. Construction ships building more military assets every hour, but also evacuation routes mapped for Vorthak civilians. Medical ships prepared to treat wounded. Plans for refugee assistance and resettlement programs. We can use all of this to save your people, Admiral Chen said. Or we can use it to demonstrate to the galaxy what happens when someone murders human children. The choice is entirely yours. High Counselor Vashkol looked around the table at his fellow council members. Centuries of Vorthak pride and military tradition warred with the absolute certainty of extinction. They could maintain their sovereignty and die with honor, or they could accept human justice and live with shame. Admiral, he said slowly, if we accept option 1, what happens to our people? Your civilization survives, Admiral Chen replied. Your species continues. Your children grow up to have children of their own. You lose your empire, but you keep your lives. And if we choose option 2, your species becomes extinct. Your worlds become memorial parks for murdered human children. Your names become synonyms for what not to do in every diplomatic academy in the galaxy. The choice was brutal in its simplicity. Survival or pride. Justice or annihilation. The future or the past. Military Commander Greshna found his voice first. Admiral, you're asking us to betray everything our species has stood for. Commander, I'm asking you to evolve into something better than child killers. But the honor of the hegemony... 847 dead children, Admiral Chen interrupted. Tell me about the honor in that. Greshna fell silent. Economic. Minister Tethzo tried a different approach. The economic impact of your demands would be catastrophic. Our people would suffer terribly. Not as much as they would suffer from extinction, Admiral Chen replied. Intelligence Director Cass Ray made one last attempt. Admiral, surely you understand that no species can simply abandon their fundamental nature overnight. Admiral Chen smiled sadly. Director, you're right. That's why we're not asking you to change overnight. We're asking you to spend the next century learning to be better. With our help. She gestured, and the space around them showed what human justice actually looked like in practice. Not just punishment, but rehabilitation. Not just consequences, but education. Species that had committed crimes learning to build better societies, former enemies becoming partners in exploration and growth. We've done this before, Admiral Chen explained. We've helped other species overcome their worst impulses. We can help you too, but only if you choose justice over pride. High Counselor. Vashkol closed his eyes and thought about the simulation he had just experienced. His homeworld in ruins, his people scattered and dying, the complete extinction of everything the Vorthak had ever built. Then he thought about the alternative. Survival. Growth. The possibility that future generations of Vorthak might look back on this moment as the beginning of something better, rather than the end of everything. Admiral, he said finally, we need time to discuss this among ourselves. Of course, Admiral Chen replied. You have 6 hours. That's how long it will take our fleets to finish their current positioning. After that, we begin implementation of either option 1 or option 2. A door materialized in the wall, leading to a private chamber where the Vorthak delegation could confer. As they filed through, Admiral Chen called after them. "Counselors, remember, this isn't really about justice for the dead. The dead are beyond justice. This is about the living. Your people, your children, your future. Choose wisely." The door closed behind them, leaving Admiral Chen alone in the conference room. She looked out at the stars and thought about 847 children who would never see those stars again. In 6 hours, she would either be implementing the most comprehensive justice program in galactic history, or she would be overseeing the extinction of an entire species. She hoped the Vorthak would choose wisely, but either way, the galaxy would remember what happened when someone murdered human children, and it would remember that humans always kept their promises, whether those promises were about justice or about annihilation. The choice was no longer hers to make. It belonged to the Vorthak High Council, sitting in their private chamber, deciding whether their species would have a future or only a past. Time would tell which they valued more, their pride or their children's lives.
Admiral Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and watched the stars. She had done this many times before, but tonight felt different. Tonight the stars seemed to watch her back. The Defiance was humanity's greatest warship. It was 2 kilometers long and carried enough weapons to destroy a small moon. Elena had commanded it for 15 years. She knew every corridor, every system, every crew member by name. The ship was her home. The crew was her family. "Admiral," said Commander Chen, her second in command, "we are receiving a transmission. It is coming from outside the solar system." Elena turned away from the window. "From the colony on Proxima?" "No, Admiral. This is different. The signal is using frequencies we have never seen before, and it is powerful. Very powerful." Elena felt a cold feeling in her stomach. Humanity had been exploring space for 300 years. They had built colonies on 12 worlds. They had found ruins of ancient civilizations on distant moons. But they had never found anyone else alive out there. The universe had seemed empty, silent, until now. "Put it on the main screen," Elena ordered. The screen flickered. Static filled it for a moment. Then the static cleared, and Elena saw something that made her heart stop. It was a face. But it was not a human face. The creature had gray skin that looked like metal. Its eyes were large and completely black. It had no nose, just 2 small holes in the center of its face. When it spoke, its mouth moved in strange ways, but the words came through in perfect English. "Species designation, human. Star system designation, Sol. This message is sent by the authority of the Valorian Galactic Empire. I am High Arbiter Zilthan. I speak for the Emperor himself." Elena stared at the screen. Around her, the bridge crew had stopped moving. No one made a sound. "Your species has been observed," the creature continued. "Your expansion has been noted. Your technology has been assessed. The Valorian Galactic Empire now claims dominion over your worlds, your resources, and your population." The creature paused. Its black eyes seemed to look directly at Elena, though she knew that was impossible. "You have 30 rotations of your planet to comply with the following demands. First, you will dismantle all military vessels. Second, you will surrender all weapons technology. Third, you will prepare your population for integration into the Empire as a servant species." Elena's hands curled into fists at her sides. "If you comply, your species will be allowed to continue existing under Imperial protection. If you do not comply, your species will be eliminated. This is not a negotiation. This is not a threat. This is simply the way things are. The strong rule. The weak serve. This has been true for 4,000 years of Imperial history. It will be true for 4,000 more." The creature's mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile. "We have conquered over 4,000 star systems. We have integrated 612 species. Those who resisted were destroyed. Their worlds are now empty. Their names are forgotten. Do not make the same mistake. You have 30 rotations. Use them wisely. The screen went black. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Commander Chen broke the silence. Admiral, what do we do? Elena did not answer immediately. She was thinking. The message had been clear. Surrender or die. Simple, clean, and absolutely terrifying. Get me a connection to Earth Command, she said finally. Priority Alpha. And wake up every captain in the fleet. We have work to do. The next 24 hours were chaos. The transmission had been received by every ship in humanity's fleet, every colony, every station. Panic was spreading. Some people demanded immediate surrender. Others called for war. Most simply did not know what to do. Elena traveled to Earth on a fast shuttle. She arrived at the United Earth Council building in Geneva just as the emergency session was beginning. The council chamber was full. Presidents, prime ministers, generals, scientists, diplomats. Everyone who mattered was there. Secretary General Park stood at the podium. He was an old man with tired eyes. Elena had known him for 20 years. She had never seen him look so afraid. We have confirmed that the transmission is genuine, Park said. Our scientists have analyzed the signal. It came from a point approximately 50 light-years from Earth. The technology used to send it is far beyond anything we possess. A murmur went through the room. We have also detected a massive fleet approaching our solar system. Current estimates suggest over 50,000 vessels. They will arrive in approximately 28 days. Now the murmur became shouts. People were standing, arguing, some were crying. Elena remained in her seat, silent, watching. General Morrison from the United Military Command spoke next. Our entire fleet numbers just under 2,000 ships. Even if every single one of our vessels was at full combat readiness, we would be outnumbered more than 25 to 1. And their technology appears to be significantly more advanced than ours. A military victory is not possible. Then we must surrender, said Ambassador Reyes from the Diplomatic Corps. We must negotiate. Perhaps we can secure better terms. Perhaps integration does not mean slavery. Perhaps they called us a servant species, someone shouted. That sounds like slavery to me. At least slavery means survival, Reyes shot back. What good is pride if we are all dead? The argument continued for hours. Elena listened to every word. She heard the fear beneath the anger. She understood it. Humanity had never faced anything like this. For 300 years, they had believed they were alone in the universe. Now they discovered they were not alone, and the universe wanted to enslave them. Finally, she stood. The room fell silent. Everyone knew who she was. Admiral Elena Vasquez, hero of the Mars Rebellion, commander of the First Fleet, the most respected military leader in human history. I have something to say, Elena announced. But first I need to tell you a story. She walked to the center of the room. 50 years ago, before I was born, a survey ship discovered something on a moon orbiting a gas giant in the Tau Ceti system. They found ruins, ancient ruins, the remains of a civilization that had died millions of years ago. Some people nodded. They knew this story. The discovery of the architect ruins had changed humanity's understanding of the universe. The ruins were studied for decades, Elena continued. Most of what we found was too damaged to understand, but we did recover some things. Records, technologies, and something else. Something that was classified at the highest level. Something that only 12 people in this room know about. She paused. The room was completely silent. We found a message, a warning, left behind by the species we call the architects. It spoke of a great empire that would rise in this region of the galaxy. An empire that would conquer and enslave. An empire that was coming. Elena looked around the room. The architects knew about the Valorians. They knew they were coming, and they left us a way to fight back. Secretary General Park stood. Admiral, What are you saying? I am saying that we have a choice, Elena replied. We can surrender. We can become slaves. We can give up everything that makes us human and hope that our masters will be kind. Or we can fight. We can take the chance that the architects left us. We can stand up and tell this empire that humanity will not bow. General Morrison shook his head. Admiral, I respect you more than anyone in this room, but what you are suggesting is suicide. They have 50,000 ships. We have 2,000. The mathematics are simple. The mathematics are simple if all we have is what we have built ourselves, Elena agreed. But we have more. The architects left us more. She pulled a small device from her pocket. It was a data crystal, glowing with a soft blue light. This contains the location of an architect facility. A hidden base that has been waiting for us to find it. It contains technology that could change everything. Ships, weapons, knowledge, all of it waiting for a species desperate enough to use it. Why have we not used it before? Someone asked. Because the facility is deep in space, far from any colony, far from any supply line. Getting there would require sending our entire fleet into the unknown. If it is a trap, if it is a lie, we would lose everything. That is why the previous councils chose to wait, to study, to be careful. Elena looked at the screen on the wall, where the image of High Arbiter Zilthan still lingered. We do not have time to be careful anymore. We have 30 days. The architects left us a gift. It is time to accept it. The council debated for another 3 hours. Some called Elena's plan madness. Others called it hope. In the end, there was only one question that mattered. What else could they do? At midnight, the vote was held. By a margin of 7 votes, the council authorized Admiral Vasquez to take the fleet to the architect facility. If she found what she was looking for, humanity would fight. If she did not, they would surrender. Elena left the council chamber and walked outside into the cool night air. Geneva was quiet. Most people had not yet heard the news. They were sleeping peacefully, dreaming ordinary dreams, not knowing that their world was about to change forever. Commander Chen was waiting for her. Admiral? What happened? We are going to war, Elena said softly. Or we are going to die. Possibly both. She looked up at the stars. Tell the fleet to prepare for departure. We leave in 48 hours. Where are we going? Elena smiled. It was a tired smile, but there was something fierce in it, something that refused to accept defeat. We are going to find out if the universe still believes in miracles. 2 days later, the entire human fleet gathered at the edge of the solar system. 1,847 ships, carriers, destroyers, cruisers, frigates, every combat vessel humanity possessed. Elena stood on the bridge of the Defiance and addressed them all. You know why we are here? She said. Her voice was carried to every ship, every crew member, every soul in the fleet. You know what is coming. The Valorian Empire has given us a choice, kneel or die. They believe those are the only options. They are wrong. She paused. Humanity has never been good at kneeling. We are stubborn. We are proud. We fight when we should surrender. We hope when we should despair. Some call that foolishness. I call it our greatest strength. On every ship, crew members listened. Some were afraid. Some were angry. All of them were waiting. We are going to a place that no human has ever been, Elena continued. We are going to find weapons that we do not yet understand, technology that we cannot yet imagine. It will be dangerous. It will be difficult. Some of us will not survive, but if we succeed, we will return with the power to tell the Valorian Empire something that no species has ever told them before. Her voice grew harder. We will tell them no. We will tell them that Earth is not theirs to take. We will tell them that humanity is not theirs to enslave. And if they do not listen, we will make them understand. She took a deep breath. This is not a battle we asked for. This is not a war we wanted. but it is ours now, and we will fight it together. All of us, every ship, every crew, every soul. We are humanity, and humanity does not surrender. Commander Chen looked at her with pride in his eyes. Admiral, the fleet reports ready. Elena nodded. Then let us go find our miracle. The fleet engaged their engines and disappeared into the darkness between stars. Behind them, Earth hung in the void, blue and green and beautiful, a world that did not yet know its fate. Far away, aboard the throne of eternity, High Arbiter Zilthan reviewed his intelligence reports. His scouts had detected the human fleet's departure. They had noted its direction. Interesting, he murmured. They are running into deep space. Perhaps they think they can hide. His aide, a young officer named Crix, looked nervous. Should we pursue, High Arbiter? No. Let them run. Let them hide. When we arrive at their homeworld, they will have no fleet to defend it. Their people will surrender without a fight, and when their brave admiral finally returns, she will find nothing but ashes. Zilthan smiled his terrible smile. Humans, so predictable, so weak. This will be easier than I thought. He did not know about the architect facility. He did not know about the message his species had tried to bury for 10,000 years. He did not know that humanity had already found the key to his empire's greatest secret. But he would learn. Very soon he would learn. And by then it would be far too late. High Arbiter Zilthan sat in his private chamber aboard the throne of eternity. The room was dark, lit only by the soft glow of floating crystals that drifted near the ceiling. He was reading the human response to his ultimatum. It was only one sentence. We remember the architects. Do you? Zilthan read the words again. Then again, his hands began to shake, not from anger, from fear. The architects. That name had been forbidden in the Empire for 10,000 years. It was erased from history books. It was deleted from computer records. Any citizen who spoke it was executed. The architects did not exist. They had never existed. That was the official truth. But Zilthan knew the real truth. All High Arbiters knew. It was passed down in secret from one leader to the next, a burden of knowledge that could never be shared. The architects had been the creators of the Valorian species. Millions of years ago, the Valorians had been simple animals. They lived on a harsh world, fighting for survival, barely intelligent enough to use tools. Then the architects came. They were an ancient race, older than most stars. They traveled the galaxy, searching for species with potential. When they found the Valorians, they decided to help. The architects gave the Valorians intelligence. They gave them technology. They taught them science, art, philosophy. They lifted the Valorians from the mud and gave them the stars. And in return, the Valorians had destroyed them. It happened slowly. Over thousands of years, the Valorians grew strong. They built their own ships. They developed their own weapons. And they began to resent their creators. The architects were too peaceful, too patient, too kind. They refused to use their power to conquer. They refused to take what they could easily take. To the Valorians, this was weakness. So the Valorians decided to prove their strength. The war lasted 300 years. The architects had better technology, but they were few in number and refused to fight at full power. They kept hoping that their children would stop. They kept believing that peace was possible, that kindness would win in the end. They were wrong. The last architect ship was destroyed above the Valorian homeworld. The last architect was killed trying to send a message of forgiveness. And the Valorians stood in the ashes of their creators and declared themselves the masters of the galaxy. That was 10,000 years ago. Since then, the Valorians had conquered everything they touched. They enslaved species after species. They built an empire that stretched across 4,000 star systems. And they told themselves that they were right, that power was everything, that the weak deserved to be ruled by the strong. But deep in their hearts they were afraid that someone would discover the truth, afraid that the architects had left something behind, afraid that one day their sins would catch up to them. And now, a species of talking apes from a small planet called Earth had sent them this message. We remember the architects. Do you? Zilthan crushed the datapad in his hand. Get me the Emperor, he ordered. Now. Far across the galaxy, the human fleet traveled through empty space. They had been flying for 3 days. 3 days of nothing but darkness and stars. The crew was getting nervous. Admiral Elena Vasquez understood their fear. She felt it herself. They were heading into the complete unknown, chasing a hope that might be nothing more than an ancient lie. If the architects had truly left something for humanity, would it still work after millions of years? Would they even be able to understand it? But she could not show doubt. Not now. Not when everything depended on her. Commander Chen approached her on the bridge. Admiral, we will arrive at the coordinates in approximately 6 hours. The crew is anxious. I know, Elena said. I am anxious too. Do you believe we will find something? Elena looked out the window at the endless stars. I have to believe. If I do not, then I have led 2,000 ships and 200,000 people to their deaths for nothing. Chen nodded slowly. The data crystal you showed the council. What exactly did it contain? Records, Elena replied. Fragments of architect history. Most of it was damaged beyond repair, but there were images, star maps, and coordinates pointing to a location in deep space, a place the architects called the Last Hope. The Last Hope? That is what the translation said. The architects knew they were losing their war. They knew their enemies would eventually destroy them, so they prepared. They built hidden facilities across the galaxy. They stored their knowledge, their technology, their ships, and they waited for someone worthy to find them. Chen frowned. Worthy? How would they know if a species was worthy? Elena smiled sadly. I do not know. Perhaps they left tests. Perhaps they trusted fate. Perhaps they simply hoped that any species clever enough to find their gifts would be wise enough to use them well. And if we are not wise enough, then we will fail, and humanity will become just another slave race in the Valorian Empire. 6 hours later, the fleet arrived at the coordinates. At first, there was nothing, just empty space, stars in the distance, no planets, no stations, nothing. Scan everything, Elena ordered. Use every sensor we have. The Defiance's sensors swept the area. Minutes passed. The crew held their breath. Then Lieutenant Park at the sensor station gasped. Admiral! I am detecting something. I do not know what it is. Show me. The main screen flickered. An image appeared. It was a ring. A massive ring of metal floating in space, larger than anything humanity had ever built. It was at least 50 kilometers across, covered in symbols and patterns that glowed with faint blue light. What is that? Chen whispered. The Architect Gate, Elena replied. Her voice was full of wonder. It is real. It is actually real. She ordered the fleet to approach slowly. As they got closer, the ring began to respond. The symbols grew brighter. The patterns began to move, shifting and changing like living things. We are being scanned, Lieutenant Park reported. The ring is analyzing us, our ships, our technology, our biology, everything. Elena stood perfectly still. This was the moment. Either the architects had deemed humanity worthy or they had not. Either this was salvation or it was a dead end. The ring stopped glowing. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then a voice spoke. It came through every speaker on every ship in the fleet. It spoke in a language that no human understood, but somehow they understood it anyway. The words appeared in their minds like memories they had always possessed. Children of Earth, you have found us. You have come seeking help. We have watched your species for a long time. We have seen your wars and your peace. We have seen your cruelty and your kindness. We have seen you struggle and fail and rise again. The voice paused. You are not perfect. No species is. But you have something that our betrayers lost long ago. You have hope. You have the ability to see enemies and choose to make them friends. You have the strength to fight and the wisdom to know when fighting is not the answer. Elena felt tears forming in her eyes. We are the architects. We are gone now, destroyed by those we loved and trusted. But we prepared for this day. We knew that our murderers would spread across the galaxy. We knew they would enslave and destroy. And we hoped that one day, a species would rise to stop them. You are that species. You are our last hope. The ring began to glow again. This time the light was blinding. Enter the gate, children of Earth, accept our gift. But remember this, power without wisdom is destruction. Strength without mercy is tyranny. Do not become what you fight. Do not let revenge consume you. Be better than our first children were. Be what we always hoped they could be. The center of the ring opened. Through it, Elena could see something impossible. Another place, another space, and in that space, ships. Thousands of ships, architect ships, waiting in silent rows, ready to be awakened. My God, Commander Chen breathed. There are so many. Elena wiped her eyes. Signal the fleet. All ships are to follow the Defiance through the gate. Whatever is on the other side, we face it together. One by one, humanity's ships entered the ring. They passed through the strange light and emerged in a vast chamber of metal and crystal. It was like being inside a hollow moon. The walls were covered with machines and structures that no human could identify. And everywhere, there were ships, architect vessels, dark and dormant, waiting for commands that had not come in millions of years. Elena looked at them with awe. How do we activate them? The answer came immediately. New information flooded into her mind, into every human mind in the fleet. Instructions, knowledge, understanding. The architects had prepared for this moment. They had made it as easy as possible for their chosen successors. The ships will respond to human commands, Elena announced, her voice filled with wonder. They recognize us. They accept us. On the throne of eternity, High Arbiter Zilthan received the report from his scouts. The human fleet had disappeared into deep space. They could not be tracked. They had vanished completely. How is this possible? He demanded. No species has ever evaded our sensors. His aide Crix was trembling. High Arbiter, there is something else. Our long-range scanners detected an energy signature before the humans disappeared. It matched signatures in our oldest archives. The Forbidden Archives. Zilthan went very still. What kind of signature? Architect technology, High Arbiter. The humans have found architect technology. The chamber was silent. Zilthan's aides watched him, waiting for his reaction. They expected anger. They expected violence. Instead, Zilthan laughed. It was a cold, terrible sound. So the ghosts of the past have finally returned. How appropriate. The architects always loved their dramatic gestures. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at his massive fleet. It does not matter. The architects are dead. Their technology is ancient. Whatever the humans have found, it will not be enough to stop us. We destroyed the architects when they were at full strength. We will destroy their inheritors just as easily. Should we increase our speed, High Arbiter? Crix asked. Yes. Maximum acceleration. I want to reach the human homeworld before their fleet can return. Let them find whatever scraps the architects left behind. By the time they come back, there will be nothing left to defend. He turned back to face his officers. And send a message to the Emperor. Tell him that the architect situation has been resolved. The humans found some old ruins. They will be dealt with. There is nothing to fear. Crix hesitated. High Arbiter, are you certain? If the humans truly have architect weapons— I am certain, Zilthan interrupted. The architects were weak. That is why they died. Whatever they left behind will be just as weak. The humans are desperate, and desperate species make foolish choices. They will come running back with their ancient relics, hoping for a miracle. His black eyes gleamed with cold confidence. And we will show them that miracles do not exist. Only power, only strength, only the Empire. But even as he spoke, a small part of Zilthan wondered. The architects had been many things, but they had never been stupid. If they had prepared for this day, if they had left something for humanity to find— No. He pushed the thought away. The architects were gone. Their time was over. The Valorians had won. They had won. In the architect chamber, Admiral Vasquez stood on the bridge of a ship that was not the Defiance. It was an architect vessel, twice the size of humanity's largest carrier, and it was responding to her commands as if it had been built for her. The fleet integration is complete, Commander Chen reported. All human ships have been connected to the architect network. We can control them all from here. Elena nodded slowly. The knowledge the architects had given them was still settling in her mind. It was overwhelming. Thousands of years of science, history, philosophy. She could feel it changing her, expanding her understanding of the universe. But there was one piece of knowledge that stood out above all the rest. One terrible truth that the architects had wanted humanity to know. The Valorians, she said quietly. They were the architects' children. The architects created them. Chen looked shocked. What? The architects uplifted the Valorians from primitive animals. They gave them everything. Intelligence, technology, a place in the galaxy. And the Valorians thanked them by committing genocide. Elena's hands clenched into fists. The Valorians built their empire on a lie. They told their people that they rose to power on their own. They erased the architects from history. They pretended that their creators never existed. That is monstrous, Chen whispered. Yes, it is. But it is also their weakness. Elena turned to face her crew. The architects did not want us to simply destroy the Valorians. They wanted us to expose the truth, to show the galaxy what really happened, to give the Valorian people a chance to choose a different path. And if they do not choose differently? Elena's expression hardened. Then we will defend ourselves. We will protect our people. And we will make sure that the architect's sacrifice was not in vain. She looked out at the architect fleet, thousands of ships humming with ancient power. Set a course for Sol. It is time to go home. The gate opened once more, and humanity's new fleet began its journey back to Earth. They were no longer running. They were coming to deliver a message. The Valorian armada arrived at the edge of the Sol system like a wave of darkness rolling across the ocean. 50,000 warships. Each one was larger than anything humanity had ever built. Each one carried enough weapons to burn a planet to ash. High Arbiter Zilthan stood on the bridge of the throne of eternity and smiled. The human homeworld was directly ahead, a tiny blue dot in the vastness of space. It looked so fragile, so vulnerable, so easy to break. Report, he ordered. Admiral Crix stepped forward. Scans show minimal defenses around the human homeworld, a few orbital stations, some automated weapons platforms, nothing that can threaten our fleet. And their military ships? Still missing, High Arbiter. They have not returned from wherever they went. Zilthan's smile grew wider. Perfect. The fools left their planet undefended while chasing ghosts. By the time they return, their world will be in flames and their people will be in chains. He walked to the center of the bridge and activated the fleet-wide communication system. His face appeared on every screen, in every ship, across the entire armada. Soldiers of the Empire. Today we add another system to our glorious domain. Today we remind the galaxy why the Valorian name is feared across 1,000 worlds. The humans thought they could hide from us. They thought they could escape their fate. They were wrong. His black eyes gleamed with cruel pleasure. Advance on the third planet. Destroy their defenses. Prepare for ground integration. And remember, we want workers, not corpses. Kill only as many as necessary to break their will. The rest will serve the Empire for the next 10,000 years. The Armada began to move. 50,000 engines ignited. 50,000 ships accelerated toward Earth. From the planet's surface, it must have looked like the stars themselves were coming to swallow them. On Earth, people watched the sky and prayed. The news had spread quickly. The alien fleet was coming. There was no escape. The government had ordered evacuations, but there was nowhere to go. Underground bunkers filled with crying families. Churches filled with people seeking comfort. Streets filled with those who simply wanted to see the sky one last time. In Geneva, Secretary General Park stood in the empty council chamber. He was alone. Most of the government had already retreated to secure locations. But Park had nowhere he wanted to be. He had sent humanity's fleet away on a desperate mission, and now he would watch the consequences of that decision. His communication device buzzed. He looked at it without hope. Probably another report of panic. Another city falling into chaos. Another million people facing their end. But the message was not about Earth. It was from Admiral Vasquez. Secretary General, we are coming. Hold on. Park stared at the words. His hands began to shake. He typed a response with trembling fingers. Admiral, is that really you? We detected your fleet leaving the system days ago. You cannot possibly be back already. The response came immediately. We found what we were looking for, and we brought friends. Tell our people to look toward Jupiter. Help is on the way. Park ran to the window. Jupiter was not visible from Earth with the naked eye, but he knew it was there, hanging in the darkness, the largest planet in their system. What did you find? He typed. The answer to everything, came the reply. Near Jupiter, something was happening. Space itself seemed to bend and twist. Light curved in impossible ways, and then, with a flash that could be seen from Earth, a ring appeared. The Architect Gate, transported from its hidden location to the heart of the Sol system. Through the ring came ships, not just the 2,000 vessels of the human fleet, but thousands more, Architect ships, ancient, massive, terrifying. They poured through the gate like water through a dam, spreading out in formation around the gas giant. On the throne of eternity, alarms began to scream. High Arbiter! Admiral Crix shouted. Massive energy signature near the 5th planet. Ships are appearing from nowhere. Thousands of them. Zilthan spun around to face the main screen. What he saw made his blood run cold. The Architect fleet hung in space like a wall of metal and light. Each ship was covered in the familiar patterns and symbols that haunted Valorian nightmares. Each ship hummed with power that the Empire had not seen in 10,000 years. No, Zilthan whispered. That is impossible. The Architects are dead. We killed them all. High Arbiter, the ships are broadcasting a signal. It is being received by our entire fleet. Block it! We cannot! It is overriding our systems! The main screen flickered. The image of the Architect fleet was replaced by a face, a human face. Admiral Elena Vasquez looked out at the Valorian armada with calm, steady eyes. High Arbiter Zilthan, she said. We need to talk. Zilthan stared at her in silence. His mind was racing. This should not be happening. The Architects were extinct. Their technology should have decayed long ago. How had these primitive humans awakened ships that had been dormant for millions of years? You look surprised, Vasquez continued. Did you think we would simply roll over and die? Did you think we would surrender without a fight? You are bluffing, Zilthan snarled. Those ships are empty husks. You cannot possibly control architect technology. No species has been able to activate their systems since they were destroyed. You are wrong about that, Vasquez replied. The architects prepared for this day. They left instructions, they left keys, and they left a message for the species that would one day face their murderers. Zilthan felt a cold hand grip his heart. You asked if we remember the architects, Vasquez said. We do, and now we know the truth. We know what you did to them. We know how you repaid their kindness with genocide. We know that your entire empire is built on the bones of your creators. The bridge crew was staring at the screen with confusion and fear. Most of them had never heard of the architects. The name meant nothing to them. You are speaking lies, Zilthan said, but his voice was not as strong as before. There were no architects. The Valorian Empire rose to power on its own strength. Really? Then let me show you something. The screen changed again. Images began to appear, records from the architect archives, videos of the young Valorian species, primitive and savage, living in caves on a harsh world. Then images of architect ships arriving, architect scientists working with the first Valorians, teaching them, helping them, loving them. And then images of war, Valorian ships attacking architect stations, architect cities burning, architect people dying, their faces full of confusion and sorrow, unable to understand why their children had turned against them. The final image was the worst. A single architect, ancient and dying, speaking into a recording device. To whoever finds this message, I am the last of my kind. We made a terrible mistake. We created a species and gave them everything. We loved them, we trusted them, and they destroyed us. The architect paused, tears streaming down its strange, beautiful face. But we do not blame them. We blame ourselves. We should have been better teachers. We should have shown them that there is more to existence than power. Perhaps the next children we find will learn what the Valorians could not. Perhaps they will remember us with kindness. The recording ended. Across the Valorian fleet, soldiers and officers stared at their screens in stunned silence. Everything they had been taught, everything they believed about their history, was a lie. They were not conquerors who had risen on their own strength. They were murderers who had killed the only beings that ever truly cared for them. That was 10,000 years ago, Vasquez said quietly. Your leaders have kept this secret ever since. They erased the architects from your history because they were ashamed, because they knew that if you learned the truth, everything would change. She looked directly at Zilthan. Well, now you know, all of you know, and you have a choice to make. Zilthan felt his control slipping away. His crew was looking at him with new eyes full of doubt, eyes full of accusation. This changes nothing, he declared loudly. Ancient history does not matter. What matters is power. What matters is the present. And in the present, we are still the Valorian Empire. We are still the masters of the galaxy. Are you? Vasquez asked. Look at your fleet, High Arbiter. Look at those architect ships. Do you really want to test your power against theirs? Zilthan turned to face the main tactical display. The numbers were not encouraging. The architect ships were larger, more advanced, and appeared to possess weapons that the Empire had no defense against. If a battle began, the outcome was far from certain. But he could not retreat. He could not show weakness. The Empire did not retreat. You may have their ships, he said slowly. But can you use them? Can your primitive species truly control technology that is millions of years old? Or are you simply hoping that their presence will frighten us into surrender? Vasquez smiled. It was not a friendly smile. Would you like a demonstration? One of the architect ships moved forward. It was massive, at least 10 kilometers long, shaped like a curved blade of pure silver. Energy began to gather at its forward section, forming into a sphere of brilliant white light. The sphere launched. It crossed the distance between the fleets in an instant, too fast for any scanner to track. It struck the empty space between the armadas and detonated. The explosion was silent in the vacuum of space, but its effects were devastating. A wave of energy spread outward, disrupting sensors, overwhelming shields, causing smaller Valorian ships to tumble out of control. And that was just the shock wave from a miss. "That was a warning shot," Vasquez said calmly. "The next one will not miss." Zilthan gripped the railing of his command platform. His knuckles were white. "You would not dare. You claim to be peaceful. You claim to be better than us. But you would murder 50,000 ships? You would kill millions of soldiers who were just following orders?" "I do not want to kill anyone," Vasquez replied. "That is why I am giving you this chance. Withdraw your fleet. Return to your space. Leave humanity alone. And take the truth with you. Share it with your people. Let them decide what kind of empire they want to be." "And if we refuse?" Vasquez's expression hardened. "Then we will defend ourselves. We will protect our home. And we will make sure that the architect's legacy survives even if yours does not." The communication ended. The screen went dark. Zilthan stood in silence. Around him, his officers waited for orders. They had seen the architect weapons. They had heard the truth about their history. They did not know what to believe anymore. "High Arbiter?" Admiral Crix ventured cautiously. "What are your orders?" Zilthan thought about everything he had worked for. He thought about the empire he had served his entire life. He thought about the secrets he had kept, the lies he had told, the millions of lives he had crushed under his heel in the name of power. He thought about the architects, dying with words of forgiveness on their lips, and he thought about the humans, standing before him with ancient weapons and impossible courage, offering him a choice he had never expected to face. Surrender or fight, truth or lies, the old way or something new. "We attack," he said finally. "All ships, battle formation, target the architect vessels, destroy them all." Admiral Crix hesitated. "High Arbiter, our crews have seen the recordings. Many of them are disturbed." "Morale is—" "I do not care about morale," Zilthan shouted. "I care about victory. We are the Valorian Empire. We do not surrender. We do not retreat. We conquer." He pointed at the screen. "Those ships are relics. Those humans are primitives playing with toys they do not understand. We have numbers. We have experience. We have the strength that built this empire from nothing." His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "And anyone who disagrees can join the humans in death. Now give the order. Attack." The Valorian armada began to move. 50,000 ships against the combined forces of humanity and the awakened architect fleet. Weapons charged, shields activated, soldiers prepared to fight and die, and at the edge of the Sol system, Admiral Elena Vasquez watched them come. "They chose war," Commander Chen said quietly. "I hoped they would choose peace." "So did I," Elena replied. "So did the architects, 10,000 years ago." She straightened her uniform and looked out at the approaching enemy. "But hope does not mean we are unprepared. If the Valorians want a battle, we will give them one they will never forget." She turned to her crew. "All hands, battle stations, protect the gate, protect Earth, and remember why we are fighting." The crew saluted and rushed to their positions. The battle for humanity's future was about to begin. The first shots of the battle split the darkness of space with lines of fire and light. Valorian weapons blazed across the void, striking architect shields in explosions of rainbow color. The ancient ships absorbed the attacks without flinching and returned fire with weapons that made the enemy vessels seem like toys. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of her architect command ship, the vessel she had named Hope. Around her, holographic displays showed the entire battlefield in perfect detail. She could see every ship, every weapon, every movement. The architect technology was responding to her thoughts, translating her commands into action faster than any human system could manage. "Enemy formation is spreading," Commander Chen reported. "They are trying to surround us." "Let them try," Elena replied. "Focus fire on their command ships. Take out their leadership and their coordination will fail." The architect fleet moved as one. Thousands of years of dormancy had not dulled their systems. They flowed through space like a school of silver fish, each ship knowing exactly where it needed to be. Their weapons were precise and devastating. With each volley, Valorian ships became clouds of debris. But the Empire was not helpless. They had numbers, they had experience, and they had desperation. High Arbiter Zilthan watched his ships die from the bridge of the throne of eternity. Each loss was a knife in his heart. But he could not stop. He could not retreat. The Empire never retreated. "Concentrate fire on the ring structure," he ordered. "That is how they brought the architect ships here. Destroy it, and they cannot receive reinforcements." "Yes, High Arbiter." A portion of the Valorian fleet broke away from the main battle. 3,000 ships raced toward the architect gate, their weapons charging for a devastating strike. Elena saw them coming. "Protect the gate! All human vessels intercept!" The human fleet responded instantly. The Defiance led the charge, followed by every human warship that could be spared from the main battle. They positioned themselves between the Valorian attack force and the gate, a wall of metal and courage. "Admiral," Captain Rodriguez of the carrier Valiant called over the communication system. "We are outnumbered 3-1. Our shields cannot hold against that kind of firepower." "I know," Elena replied. Her voice was calm but filled with pain. "But if they destroy the gate, we lose our connection to the architect facility. We lose everything." There was a long pause. Then Rodriguez spoke again. "Understood, Admiral. It has been an honor." The human fleet opened fire. Their weapons were weaker than the Valorians. Their shields were thinner. Their ships were slower, but they fought with a fury that surprised even their enemies. The Defiance took the center position, drawing the heaviest fire. Commander Chen was at the helm, his hands dancing across the control panels as he dodged and weaved through the incoming attacks. "Hull breach on Deck 7, someone shouted. "Hull breach on Deck 12. We have fires in engineering." "Keep firing," Chen ordered. "Keep them away from the gate." The Valiant exploded. Then the cruiser Perseverance. Then the destroyer Swift. One by one, human ships died, their crews sacrificing themselves to protect the ancient ring that held humanity's only hope. On Earth, people watched the battle through telescopes and satellites. They saw the flashes of light in the distant darkness. They knew that each flash meant someone was dying. Millions of people held their breath and prayed for a miracle. In the main battle, the architect ships were winning. Their technology was simply too advanced. Valorian weapons could barely scratch their shields, while architect beams cut through Imperial armor like paper. But the Valorians kept coming, throwing ship after ship into the fight, accepting terrible losses in exchange for any damage they could inflict. "They are insane," Elena muttered. "They would rather die than admit defeat." "That is how they conquered the galaxy," Chen replied over the communication link. His voice was strained. The Defiance was barely holding together. "They never stop. They never give up. They just keep coming until you break." "Then we will not break," Elena said firmly. "Hold the line. I am sending architect reinforcements." She directed a wing of 20 architect ships toward the gate. They moved with terrible speed, crossing the battlefield in moments. Their arrival turned the tide. Valorian ships that had been pressing their advantage suddenly found themselves under attack from weapons they could not match. But the damage was done. Half the human fleet was gone. The Defiance was crippled, its engines failing, its weapons nearly depleted. The gate was intact, but the cost had been staggering. On the throne of eternity, Zilthan watched his gate assault fail. He had lost 3,000 ships in exchange for nothing. The ring still stood. The human fleet, though battered, still fought. And the architect vessels continued their relentless advance. "High Arbiter," Admiral Crick said quietly, "we have lost 15,000 ships. Our fleet is at 60% strength. If we continue at this rate—" "I know the numbers," Zilthan snapped. "I do not need you to tell me what I can see." He stared at the tactical display with hatred in his eyes. This should have been easy. A primitive species. A handful of ancient relics. How were they winning? "All ships, new orders," he announced. "Ignore the enemy fleet. Target the human homeworld directly. If we cannot destroy their ships, we will destroy what they are fighting for." The Valorian armada changed direction. Instead of engaging the architect fleet, they began racing toward Earth, their weapons powered up to maximum. Their targeting systems locked onto the blue planet hanging in the distance. Elena saw what was happening and felt her blood freeze. "No, they would not." "They are going to burn Earth," Chen confirmed. 35,000 ships, all heading for the planet. We cannot intercept them all." Elena looked at the tactical display. The numbers were impossible. Even with the architect fleet at full power, they could not stop that many ships before at least some of them reached Earth. And it would only take a few ships to turn the planet into a graveyard. "All architect vessels, maximum pursuit," she ordered. "Target engines first. We have to slow them down." The chase began. Architect ships raced after the Valorian armada, their weapons blazing. They destroyed ship after ship, but the Empire kept going. They did not try to fight back. They simply ran toward Earth as fast as their engines could carry them. On the ground, people saw the approaching lights and knew what they meant. Panic spread through every city on every continent. Parents held their children. Lovers held each other. Old enemies embraced and forgave. If these were their last moments, they wanted to spend them without hatred. Then something unexpected happened. The architect ships began to transmit. Not weapons fire, not tactical commands, information, massive streams of data flooding into every human system. Computers on Earth, on the remaining human ships, on the gate itself. All of them suddenly filled with knowledge they had never possessed. Elena felt it enter her mind. The architects had been transmitting to the humans throughout the battle, but this was different. This was everything. Science. History, art, philosophy, medicine, engineering. Millions of years of accumulated wisdom, compressed and delivered in a single burst. "Admiral?" Chen's voice was full of wonder. "Are you seeing this?" "Yes," Elena breathed. "The architects. They are giving us everything." And then she heard the voice. The same voice that had welcomed them at the gate. The voice of the last architect, recorded 10,000 years ago, but somehow still alive in the data stream. "Children of Earth, we have given you our weapons and our ships, but these are not our true gift. Our true gift is knowledge, understanding, the wisdom we gathered across 1,000,000 years of existence." The stream continued to flow. Elena saw images of distant worlds. She learned the secrets of stars and the mysteries of black holes. She understood diseases that humanity had not yet named and cures that would save billions of lives. She grasped philosophies that made Earth's greatest thinkers seem like children taking their first steps. "We made a mistake with our first children," the voice continued. "We gave them power without context, strength without wisdom. They never understood why we believed in peace. They never felt the joy of creation or the sorrow of destruction. They only understood taking, only understood winning." The voice paused. "Do not make our mistake. Use our weapons to defend yourself, but use our knowledge to build something better. Create a galaxy where strength serves wisdom, where power is used to heal, not to harm, where victory means lifting others up, not pushing them down." Elena felt tears streaming down her face. She was not alone. Across the human fleet, across Earth itself, people were crying as the architect wisdom filled their minds and hearts. "We are gone," the voice said softly, "but we will live on in you. Remember us, remember our mistakes, and be better than we were, be better than our first children could ever be." The transmission ended. The data stopped flowing, but its effects remained. Elena looked at the tactical display with new eyes. The Valorian fleet was still racing toward Earth. The situation was still desperate. But she saw something now that she had not seen before: patterns, possibilities, solutions hidden in the chaos. "Chen," she said suddenly, "the Valorian formation, do you see the weakness?" There was a pause. Then Chen's voice came back, filled with the same new understanding. "The center ships. They are pulling power from their rear shields to boost their engines. If we hit them from behind while they are running, their shields will fail, and the ships behind them will collide with the debris." Elena looked at the architect fleet. They were too slow to catch the Valorians, but there was another option. "All architect vessels, prepare to use emergency acceleration. 80% power to engines, 20% to weapons. We are going to do something the Valorians have never seen before." Commander Chen sounded worried. "Admiral, emergency acceleration at that level could damage the ships. The architects never intended—" "The architects gave us these ships so we could save our home," Elena interrupted. "They would understand." She took a deep breath. "All ships, execute." The architect fleet surged forward. Their engines screamed with power that should have been impossible. They closed the distance with the Valorians in seconds, appearing behind the enemy formation like ghosts. And then they opened fire. The rear of the Valorian fleet dissolved. Ships with weakened shields exploded. Ships behind them crashed into the debris and exploded too. The chain reaction spread through the formation, turning a wall of warships into a cloud of fire and metal. Zilthan watched in horror as his fleet came apart. 15,000 ships in the center of his formation were simply gone, destroyed in a single devastating attack. "How?" he whispered. "How could they know?" He did not understand. He could not understand. The architects had given humanity something the Valorians never had. Not just weapons, not just technology, but the ability to think in ways that the Empire had never imagined. The remaining Valorian ships scattered. Some continued toward Earth, but they were few now, and the architect fleet cut them down one by one. Others tried to flee back toward the edge of the solar system. Some simply stopped, their crews too shocked to continue. The battle was not over, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. Humanity was going to survive. On the Defiance, Commander Chen sat in his captain's chair and watched the enemy retreat. His ship was dying around him. Fires burned in a dozen compartments. Half his crew was dead or wounded. But they had held the line. They had protected the gate. They had won. "Admiral," he said weakly, "I think we did it." Elena's voice came back filled with emotion. "You did more than that, old friend. You saved everything." Chen smiled and closed his eyes. He could rest now. He had earned it. Around Jupiter, the architect gate hummed with satisfied energy. Its purpose was fulfilled. The species it had waited for had proven themselves worthy. The galaxy would never be the same. And on Earth, billions of people looked up at the sky and saw for the first time in days that the lights were no longer coming closer. They were pulling back. The enemy was retreating. Against all odds, against all logic, against everything that should have been possible, humanity had won. But the battle was not the end. It was only the beginning. High Arbiter Zilthan stood alone on the bridge of the Throne of Eternity. His officers had moved to the edges of the room, keeping their distance, watching him with eyes that held more fear than respect. The battle was lost. Everyone knew it. The only question that remained was what would happen next. Half his fleet was gone. 25,000 ships destroyed in a single day. It was the worst defeat in the history of the Valorian Empire. Worse than the ancient wars. Worse than any rebellion. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Empire had been beaten. And they had been beaten by a species they had dismissed as primitive. A species they had planned to enslave. A species that had somehow awakened the ghosts of the architects and turned their own ancient sins against them. The main screen flickered. Admiral Elena Vasquez appeared once more. Her face was tired, covered in dust and dried blood from a wound on her forehead. Her ship had been damaged during the battle, but her eyes were still strong, still determined. Still burning with a fire that Zilthan could not understand. "High Arbiter," she said, "it is over. Your fleet is broken. Your attack has failed. We have won." Zilthan said nothing. There was nothing to say. "I could destroy you now," Vasquez continued. "The architect ships have enough power to wipe out what remains of your armada. You would not be able to stop us. You would die here, in the darkness between stars, far from your home." She paused. Her expression shifted. The hardness in her eyes softened into something else. Something that looked almost like compassion. "But that is not what I want." Zilthan finally spoke. His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "What do you want, human? Revenge? Surrender? The pleasure of watching your enemies beg for mercy?" "I want you to listen," Vasquez replied. "Really listen. Not as a conqueror facing defeat, not as an enemy calculating his next move, but as a living being who has the chance to make a different choice." She leaned forward slightly. "Your empire is built on a lie. You know this now. Your people know this now. The recordings I transmitted during the battle have spread to every ship in your fleet. They have probably already reached your homeworld. The truth about the architects cannot be hidden anymore." Zilthan felt a cold weight in his stomach. She was right. The secret that his predecessors had protected for 10,000 years was exposed. Everything the Empire believed about itself was crumbling. "You can try to suppress it," Vasquez said. "You can punish those who speak the truth. You can burn the records and execute the witnesses. Maybe you will succeed. Maybe your people will choose to believe the old lies instead of the new truth. Empires have survived worse scandals. But I do not think that will work. Not this time. Your soldiers saw the architect recordings with their own eyes. They felt the weight of what their ancestors did. They know that the beings who gave your species everything were murdered by your people. That knowledge will spread. It will grow. It will change things." Zilthan shook his head slowly. "You think you understand us? You do not. The Valorian people are loyal. They will not abandon the Empire because of some ancient history. They will not care about species that died before their grandparents were born." "Perhaps," Vasquez admitted. "Or perhaps they will care very much. Perhaps some of them have always wondered why the Empire is so afraid of questions. Why certain topics are forbidden. Why anyone who speaks of peace is treated as a traitor. Perhaps the truth will give them the answer they have been seeking." She straightened in her chair. "But I am not here to predict the future. I am here to offer you a choice." "What choice?" "You can withdraw your fleet, return to your space. Tell your emperor what happened here. Tell your people the truth about the architects, and let them decide what kind of civilization they want to be." Zilthan laughed bitterly. "And in return, what do you demand? Tribute? Territory? Hostages?" "Nothing," Vasquez said simply. "We demand nothing." For a moment, Zilthan thought he had misheard. "Nothing? You defeat the greatest military force in the galaxy and you ask for nothing?" "We did not fight this battle for conquest. We did not fight for revenge. We fought to protect our home, our people, our right to exist. That is all we wanted, and now we have it." Vasquez's voice grew softer. The architects gave us many gifts. Their ships, their weapons, their knowledge. But the most important gift was their wisdom. They taught us that the cycle of violence never ends on its own. Someone has to choose to break it. Someone has to be brave enough to offer mercy instead of vengeance. We cannot be friends, she continued. Not after today. There is too much pain between us. Too many dead on both sides. But we do not have to be enemies forever. The galaxy is large enough for both of us. We can go our separate ways. We can heal our wounds. We can build something new. Zilthan stared at her. In his entire life, no one had ever spoken to him this way. In the Empire, defeat meant death. Mercy was weakness. The strong took what they wanted, and the weak accepted what they were given. That was the natural order. That was the only order. But looking at this human woman, with her tired eyes and bloody face, standing in victory and offering peace instead of destruction, Zilthan felt something he had never felt before. Doubt. Why? He asked. Why would you do this? We came to enslave your people. We came to burn your world. If our positions were reversed, we would show no mercy. We would destroy you and celebrate our victory for 1,000 years. Why are you different? Vasquez smiled. It was a sad smile, filled with all the weight of the battle they had just survived. Because that is what makes us human. We have the same capacity for cruelty that you have, the same hunger for power, the same fear of the unknown. We have done terrible things in our history. We have made mistakes that cost millions of lives. We are not saints. We are not perfect. But we also have the capacity to choose, to look at an enemy and see a future ally, to look at a monster and see a victim of circumstances, to look at the worst of the galaxy and still believe that something better is possible. She met his eyes directly. The architects believed in your people once. They saw potential in the Valorians. They thought you could become partners in building a better galaxy. They were wrong. You chose a different path. But that does not mean the choice is gone forever. Every day is a new chance. Every moment is an opportunity to be different from what you were. I am offering you that opportunity now, not because you deserve it, not because I trust you, but because I believe that the only way to end the cycle of violence is for someone to take the first step, and I am choosing to take that step today. Silence filled the bridge of the throne of eternity. Zilthan's officers watched him, waiting to see what he would do. The fate of two civilizations hung in the balance. Zilthan thought about his life. He thought about the battles he had fought, the species he had conquered, the worlds he had burned. He had always told himself it was necessary, that the empire required strength, that mercy was weakness. But looking at his shattered fleet, looking at the ancient ships of a species his ancestors had murdered, looking at the face of a woman who had every right to destroy him and had chosen not to, Zilthan wondered if he had been wrong. What if strength was not about destroying your enemies? What if real power was having the ability to destroy and choosing not to? He closed his eyes. For a long moment, he stood in darkness, feeling the weight of 10,000 years of history pressing down on him. Then he opened his eyes and spoke. All ships, he said quietly. All ships. This is High Arbiter Zilthan. Stand down. Deactivate weapons. Prepare to withdraw. Admiral Crick stepped forward, his face filled with confusion. High Arbiter? Are you certain? I am certain, Zilthan replied. We have lost this battle. We will return home. We will tell our people what happened here. We will tell them the truth about the architects. And we will let them decide what happens next. He looked at the screen where Vasquez was watching him with an expression he could not read. You have given me a choice, human. I do not know if I am making the right decision. I do not know if my people will thank me or curse me. But I know that continuing this fight will only lead to more death. And I have seen enough death today. Vasquez nodded slowly. That is all I asked for. a chance, a possibility. The rest is up to you. The Valorian fleet began to move. Damaged ships limped toward the edge of the solar system. Destroyed vessels were left behind as silent monuments to the battle. One by one, the survivors engaged their faster-than-light drives and vanished into the darkness. The last ship to leave was the Throne of Eternity. Before it jumped, Zilthon sent one final message. Human, Vasquez, you spoke of the architects, of their hope, of their belief in something better. I want you to know that I have carried their message with me for many years. The recording of the last architect, the one who spoke of forgiveness. He paused. I always thought it was the rambling of a dying fool. Now I am not so sure. Perhaps the architects understood something that my people have forgotten. Perhaps there is more to existence than conquest. I do not promise peace. I cannot speak for the emperor or for my people, but I can speak for myself. And I will remember this day. I will remember that humanity could have destroyed us and chose mercy instead. That is a lesson worth learning. The throne of eternity disappeared in a flash of light. The Sol system was silent. The battle was over. Humanity had survived. On the bridge of the Hope, Admiral Elena Vasquez finally allowed herself to breathe. The weight of command, the fear, the responsibility, all of it crashed down on her at once. She sat in her chair and let the tears come. Commander Chen's voice crackled over the communication system. His ship was barely functional, but he was alive. Admiral, are you all right? I am fine, Elena managed. Just processing. We won. We actually won. Yes, we did. There was a long pause. Then Chen asked the question that everyone was thinking. What happens now? Elena looked out the window at the stars, the same stars she had watched so many times before. But they looked different now, brighter, fuller of possibility. Now we rebuild. We mourn our dead. We heal our wounds. And we figure out how to live in a galaxy that knows we exist. Do you think the Valorians will come back? Maybe. Probably. There are others in the Empire who will not accept this defeat. There are generals and admirals who will want revenge. We need to be ready. She stood and walked to the window. But we also need to remember why we fought. We did not fight to become conquerors. We did not fight to build an empire of our own. We fought for our right to exist, for our freedom, for the future of our children. The architects gave us their knowledge, their wisdom, their hope for something better. We owe it to them to use those gifts wisely, to build a civilization that is worthy of their sacrifice. Elena turned back to face the stars. We have a lot of work to do. 50 years passed. The galaxy changed in ways that no one had predicted. The Valorian Empire did not collapse, but it fractured. Some systems remained loyal to the old ways. Others, inspired by the truth about the architects, sought new paths. Civil wars erupted. Revolutions flared. The iron grip of the empire loosened, bit by bit. Humanity grew. They spread to new worlds, using the architect technology to travel further and faster than they ever had before. They made contact with other species, some friendly, some hostile, all fascinating. They built stations and cities. They cured diseases and solved ancient mysteries. They made mistakes and learned from them. The Architect Gate still orbited Jupiter, maintained and protected by a permanent fleet. No one knew if it would ever be needed again. But humanity kept it ready, just in case. Admiral Elena Vasquez retired after 30 years of service. She moved to a small house on Luna, where she could watch the Earth rise above the horizon every night. She wrote her memoirs. She taught at the military academy. She played with her grandchildren and told them stories about the old days. One evening, her granddaughter asked her a question. "Grandmother, did we win the war?" Elena thought about it for a long time. She thought about the battle, the sacrifice, the message she had sent to Zilthon, the choice she had made. "We did something better than win," she finally said. "We chose not to become monsters. That is the only victory that truly matters." Her granddaughter frowned. "But the Valorians are still out there. There are still wars. There is still fighting." "Yes, there will always be fighting. There will always be those who choose violence over peace. That is the nature of the universe. But there will also always be those who choose differently. Those who see enemies and try to make them friends. Those who have power and use it to help instead of harm." Elena pulled her granddaughter close. "The architects believed that one day a species would rise that could break the cycle of violence. A species that could look at the worst of the galaxy and still hope for something better. They waited millions of years for that species to appear. And when they found us, they gave us everything they had. We cannot waste that gift. We cannot become the Valorians. We cannot build our own empire of fear and slavery. We have to be better. We have to keep trying, even when it is hard, even when it seems hopeless, even when the easy path leads to darkness." She smiled at her granddaughter. "That is what it means to be human. Not our science, not our ships, not our weapons, but our stubborn, foolish, wonderful belief that tomorrow can be better than today. That is what the architects saw in us. That is why they chose us. And that is why we can never give up." Outside the window, the earth rose slowly above the lunar horizon. Blue and green and beautiful. A world that had faced destruction and survived. A world that had learned terrible lessons and grown stronger. The stars stretched out beyond it, infinite and unknown. And somewhere in that vastness, humanity's message was still spreading. The message they had sent to the Valorians. The message the architects had left for whoever came after them. The message that had changed everything. We remember. We endure. And we will never stop hoping for something better. The galaxy was vast. The future was uncertain. There would be more battles, more challenges. More moments when everything hung in the balance. But humanity would be ready. They always were.